This is Do Good and Do Well, the podcast for people who want to make a positive difference in the world without losing themselves in the process. I'm Sarah Fox, and in this podcast, I'll be sharing stories from social and creative entrepreneurs and leaders to help inspire you to do good and do well. Hello and welcome to today's episode of Do Good and Do Well. Today's guest is Siobhan Strode, an advocacy consultant, mentor for changemakers and founder of This Sister. With a background spanning communications, education, activism and politics, Siobhan helps individuals and organisations raise their voices, build confidence and drive real change from boardrooms to campaign trails and beyond. In this conversation, we talk about the power of sharing your story, leading with your values, and why real leadership starts with knowing who you are and what you stand for. Siobhan shares her insights into how purpose-driven leaders can speak up with confidence, create movements that matter, and make change that lasts. So whether you're finding your voice or you've been leading for years, this episode is a powerful reminder that doing good and doing well isn't just about having the loudest voice. It's about having a clear and honest one. I hope you enjoy. Okay, let's kick off. I would love to know, and I'd love for the listeners to know a bit about you and what led you to set up This Sister Speaks, and maybe tell us what it is as well.
Okay, cool. I was a teacher in my previous life and I had a breakdown in 2013, spent a couple of years figuring how to get out of teaching. What can I do? What am I actually good at? I figured reading and writing. I'm good at that. I've taught 5-year-olds for years. So I left teaching in 2015 to pursue a solopreneur freelance life. At the same time as doing that, I had found this freedom to kind of enter into activism and campaigning and got heavily involved in politics. So simultaneously to running my business and having 2 small children, I decided it'd be a great idea to set up a political career. And became a town councillor, stood in multiple elections, etc. I was doing all this training in leadership and running my business and teaching people to use their voice. And then I was kind of 2021, I worked with Kerry Jarvis to bring something to life that I had been procrastinating on. And it was Sister Speaks. And it has gone through several iterations, but essentially it is about helping people raise their voice and lead the change. It's a brilliant program. I worked with Kerry really hard over 6 months to kind of bring it to life. And in classic Siobhan style, brought it out at the beginning of 2022, kind of launched it over Christmas, 6 weeks before I was due to have my 3rd child. I think it was a 9-week program, 9 weeks before I had Rory. And I had a scheduled C-section, so I knew when I was having him. Honestly, it was sociable, hilarious looking back. At the time, I was like, it's going to be amazing. And I thought, this is a really stupid idea. But yeah, so that's how This Speaks came to life. And my copywriting business in the interim was called This Sister Scribes, which is really hard to say when you've got a lisp. So I don't know why I've done this to myself. But yeah, I am very like feminism, intersectional feminism is the heart of everything I do. My whole being kind of centers around women with an asterisk, all women raising their voice and telling their story.
I love that. It sort of feels quite, there's lots of different elements in that. You've got your communications, you've got education, you've got politics, you've got activism, you've got copywriting, you've got having a baby, you've got all of this stuff. But
ADHD,
a bit of neurodivergence in there as well. But I guess what I really hear though is there is a really strong theme. It's not like they're not massive pivots. There's shifts in the way that you've been evolving and the way that you've been thinking about this work. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about where you think that has stemmed from, that need to help people share their stories and lean into their values.
Funnily enough, I sent an email to my list about this last week or the week before, and a lot of it comes from my absolute abhorrent hate for apathy. Essentially, I had quite a traumatic childhood experience when I learned what apathy was. That pivotal moment in my childhood, age 10, shortly before my 11th birthday, made me realise how important it is to stand up for what you believe in and to step in when you see bad things happening. I hadn't really realised this until I was having some therapy not that long ago, and that is kind of the root of my work. There's lots of things that stem from that. I get really stressed about letting people down, and I tell myself stories about letting people down. My experience of domestic abuse, essentially, of my father and my mum, and the way we weren't allowed to talk about it afterwards, and the way it was very taboo. So I went back to school a few days after this big incident happened and was essentially told to be quiet and not talk about my experiences. It's the 90s, no one got offered therapy or anything, did they, after traumatic experiences? I was told to keep quiet, basically. And my mum was told to keep quiet. Despite 3 children and all the people on the road who witnessed this horrific incident, people didn't believe her story. She was talking about how violent my dad was. But no, not Paddy. Oh, he's so charming. And I mean, obviously that's what abusers do anyway. For me, that whole story is central to why I do what I do. I don't want any woman to feel, it doesn't matter how boring your story is, the world needs to hear it. And the reason is men's voices always overshadow women's stories. Women's stories have been erased from history over and over and over again. Men have taken women's stories and rewritten them for themselves. I could give you countless examples from history, but I think you probably know quite a few of them. There are so many stories, and from my personal experience, I hadn't really realised this is why I do what I do. It's just been what I do, and I've never really thought about why I'm so passionate about it. It's only been unpicking it with a therapist that I've kind of come to this, like, oh, this makes so much sense. And I wrote this really cathartic email talking about this day that I learned what apathy was. And I got some beautiful responses. It felt really like vulnerable to put it out there, because I've kind of always hinted at things, and I'm very loud and I talk about different issues and social justice stances, but I've never fully told my own story apart from when I've been standing on a stage. So yeah, it's been I've grown a lot, I'd say, Sarah. In kind of therapist talk, I've grown a lot for the last couple of months.
Yeah, in my work, I notice that people who are driven by changing something, whatever that something is, there is a core, there is a stem, there is an experience, or they've either experienced injustice or they've witnessed injustice in some way, and that drives them forward. Like, I wonder, can you talk a little bit about the difference that you really want to make in the world? What would the dream be for you?
Oh, so the dream would be, I'd love to start hosting events. That would be my dream, is to bring people together for people to have the opportunity to go on stage and share their story with a wider audience. That's one of my pipe dreams. But really, it's just going into organisations, helping them build a community and safe place for people to be encouraged to speak up and things not to be taboo anymore. I think that's one of the things I get really frustrated about. We don't talk about our salaries, and we don't talk about bad things that have happened in the places that we work. There's no encouragement of people to share their experiences. I would love to be doing that on a daily basis, like going into universities and teaching people the importance of speaking up and why women's stories matter. And there's so many different things I would love to do, but for me, it's about confidence, imposter syndrome, and systemic things blocking women. I would love to help people fight their way through those barriers. I think that's my thing, is this telling your story. It sounds really pathetic and little, but actually the more of us who do it, it's kind of like a ripple effect. When you hear someone telling their story, you create a bit of a ripple effect in people's confidence. You almost need someone to role model that for you before you can take that next step. And that's why sisterhood is so important, right? Like, that's why story circles and sister circles, programs like mine, help people amalgamate ideas, galvanize things, and actually take that step. Sometimes it is just baby steps. For other people, it's like standing on a stage and doing a TEDx, but for other people, it's writing an email or talking to their parents or standing up for themselves. It doesn't have to be mega.
Yeah, it feels like I don't know, the word that popped up in my head as you were talking was solidarity. If you're hearing other people tell their stories, there's something you can often relate to. Although our experiences might be different in some way, there's also a lot of similarity, and there can be that sense of solidarity, which then gives you confidence as you see other people model that and that they are safe to do so. And actually, it's really impacting them and others in a positive way, although we know that it's not always safe to share your stories for some people. But I think what is coming really strongly for me is whether it's telling stories or advocating for yourself or advocating for others or stepping in when you see injustice, it goes back to that thing you said earlier when you shared your story with us, which was about being told to keep quiet. And actually, you're doing the opposite. You're like, no, don't be quiet. Don't keep quiet. Speak. And let's not be erased. Let's be visible. Like, it feels like that's a really strong thread. I don't know if that resonates.
Yeah, definitely. And at the moment, I'm writing my new website copy. So that's really helpful, Sarah. Thank you. And I think when you're in it, you can't see all the different threads. So it's really nice to have you say that back, because I can't see that for myself at the moment. Yeah, that definitely resonates with me. And I think the visibility thing, again, there's safe ways to be visible and maybe slightly stretchier places to be visible. There's things like showing up on your Instagram stories and doing a talkie story. That's like a little bit of visibility, isn't it? But for some people, that's huge. And then there's speaking on a panel or doing a podcast or reaching out to a publisher to get your book. Those things for visibility are huge. And not everyone's ready for all of those. But you have to meet people where they're at and then help them stretch in their own way. Not everyone's ready to take, not everyone's going to want to stand for Parliament, for example.
I can imagine many people want to.
No, I was stupid enough to do it. But the reason that I did that was because I was like, well, if not me, who?
Yeah.
And who's it going to be? It's going to be a man. There was no representation for younger families and women. I stood against 4 men who were at least 10 to 15 years older than me. For me, that matters. Now you think, oh, well, actually, I stood for Parliament. Like somebody else, even if it's for another party, they're like, oh, Siobhan did it. Like, well, she did it. I can do it too. When you see someone else doing it, you're like, oh, well, maybe I could run for town council or step in and be the secretary of the PTA or whatever it is that you think you could contribute or bring your skills to. I've got another email going out to my list at some point this week. I'm not asking you to stand for Parliament. I think that's what people think, because I talk about that kind of stuff a lot, being political and going on marches. You don't have to be doing that stuff to be telling your story or raising your voice. It's about being confident enough to start to rock the boat a little bit. It doesn't have to be this huge, like, tidal wave. It could just be like a little ripple.
And how, like, you used the example earlier about going on a podcast. Some of the fears I've noticed for people coming on this is that it's recorded and out there. So what you say is not written in stone, but it can feel like it's written in stone. And I think that comes down to maybe about trust, kind of like trusting yourself that you have things to say. We evolve, we change our minds. That's all okay. I just wonder how you are helping people to trust themselves to do that, even if it is in a really small way.
I think part of it is leading by example. And if I get something wrong, then admitting that I've got that thing wrong and that what I'm doing to kind of change my way of thinking or whatever. So like posting about my learnings or what I'm doing to kind of unlearn, essentially. But also I think giving people the opportunities to flex different muscles and try different things and practice in a safe space. So for example, in the last round, we practiced doing the talk. I gave them a homework. It came as a bit of a shock and they did freak out about it because it wasn't on the plan. Like my husband was like, well, we do this with year sixes, so why wouldn't you do it with grown-ups? And I was like, that's a really good idea. They completely freaked out. It was fine. It worked out fine, but it was stretchy to be able to put together a 2-minute talk in a safe space with 6 other people. Like that was quite scary to perform the talk. It was scary, but only for those 6 people to see if they missed it. But like having somewhere safe to practice those things, to make mistakes, to be like, to get some feedback and be like, did you think the talk I gave was good? Did you think the topic was great? What would you add in if you were doing it? Was there anything I missed? Could I bring in a quote from somebody here? That kind of stuff is what those spaces are for. I think that's something we're kind of lacking, because apart from talking to your mates who aren't always honest, our friends are like, oh yeah, that was great. That was so good. And actually what you need is constructive, supportive, nourishing feedback that isn't, yes, that was great. That like, you need somebody to say, I really loved what you were doing at the beginning of that. Your introduction was really great. I love the way you brought in, I don't know, Audre Lorde or someone. Do you think maybe you could stop waving your hands around? Is, obviously ironic because you can see me. But like, yeah, little things like that, or giving them a tip to tweak something in their talk. I just feel like you can do other things in a safe space with other people where you're asking questions. People are so worried about being cancelled. For example, I was on a call the other day with somebody and they were like, can I just ask, can you explain to me about the Supreme Court judgment and about the trans rights? Because I don't understand. Can you explain it to me like I'm an idiot? This wasn't like in a paid space. This is in Body Doubling Club, which is something else I do because, I give myself accountability to do work 3 times a week. Like paid membership. But yeah, she was just asking, and and it was a safe space that I was holding. We're there to do work, but she was asking a genuine question because she feels like she can't ask other people because there'd be judgment there. I just think that it's really important for women to have places that they can ask questions, practice things, flex their different skills.
I think there's a quote that I heard. I'm going to not say this properly to never get quotes right. It's a Carl Jung quote. This is really not like the quote at all. But essentially he's saying, in order for a good relationship to happen, it is about the relationship. It's not about whether you're a therapist, a client, a coach, a client. It's about whether you have that connection, that work can be done. And I think you're right. Can we create more spaces where there's a curiosity rather than a judgment, where we can ask those questions? Because quite frankly, there is so much stuff going on at the moment in the world that is so complex and hard to understand, and people fear saying what their opinion is on it because they don't want to exclude others.
Yeah, everyone's worried about offending somebody, but whatever you say, someone's going to get offended, right?
Well, that's it. And I learned quite early on when I was writing my newsletter, I spent hours writing it because I would write a sentence and then in my head I was like, I probably only had about 5 people on my list. I was like, oh no, what if they think I'm mean? Or my thing is I don't want to be seen mean. I don't want to be unkind. So I'll do anything in my power to make sure that doesn't happen. Or if I've said something in the wrong way or offend someone, so then I would delete it and then start again and be like, oh no, honestly, the time that I spent thinking about what I perceived other people would be thinking, forgetting that they'll probably take about a minute to read the newsletter and they've got way more other things than to go through every single word that I've written. But once I realised that I'm just going to imagine that I'm writing to one person and I'm telling them what I think. And I can't control what they think of me. I cannot control whether they like me or not. I mean, that was a massive breakthrough. I cannot control what they do with the information. I cannot control any of that. What I can control is that I can still use my values of kindness and community and care. I can still do that with my newsletter, but I don't have to worry about every single word. And I think that's quite a big thing. I hear that of the people I work with as well, that their values are very strong around community, social justice, collaboration, and universalism, almost like it's to an extreme that they're then worried about being the complete opposite.
That's really interesting, because I would definitely say that. I think most people that I've worked with, whether that's on a website or mentoring them to do change-making stuff, or even just talking about content and brainstorming content ideas, people are like, oh, but I would say, oh yeah, you'd be great talking about this in blah, blah, blah. And they'd be like, oh, I don't know, I might offend somebody. I think There's an element of age and sage where you get to a certain point, you're like, oh, give less of a shit now.
Yeah,
whether that's because you've been through therapy or just hit perimenopause and you don't have any fucks left to give. I definitely feel like I was able to release a lot of that. When I first set up my business, I did exactly the same thing. I was like, I just want everyone to think I'm a professional. I didn't talk about teaching, didn't talk about my family, didn't talk about my politics. It was very like beige. I didn't want to get off on the wrong foot with anybody. I didn't want people to think I was political. When I had this like release, I think it was probably 2018, beginning of 2018. And I just kind of went, oh, I don't have to wear all these hats. I can actually get better clients if I just turn up as myself. I wouldn't have called it leading back then, but like, you know, talking about my mental health, talking about my family, talking about the things I was doing for the town council, my community, my union, and all this kind of stuff. Like, I wasn't sharing any of that before. Like, in my emails, I wasn't sharing in my content, I wasn't sharing it anywhere. I was doing all these amazing things and I didn't think to share them because I thought people would think I was unprofessional because I had all these other things going on. Like, it made me less of a copywriter, but actually, like, it made me stand out.
Yeah.
Lots of people do similar things, particularly at the beginning of our businesses, or when we're new in an organisation, or when we're new in a job, kind of like just fit in.
Yeah, at all costs.
Like, there's this belonging thing, isn't it? That's a, you know, universal need, is a human thing where we want to fit in. And that's part of this we talk about in this Sister Speaks, is belonging, and this kind of like, actually, to belong in spaces where we want to be, you need to be yourself fully, and you need to feel safe to be yourself fully. If you aren't fully yourself, you'll never fully belong because you still won't feel accepted. I think that's been quite a journey for me since 2018. There's lots of amazing things happen because I've released myself from this need to people please. Don't get me wrong, I'm still a people pleaser. Like,
it's hard to shift completely, isn't it? God blimey. As you were talking then, the things I've just written down, sort of a spectrum of squashing myself down, I heard you say, to leading as myself. And I think that's so powerful. If we can take steps to stop squashing ourselves down, of course, we've got to think about what's in our control within that, because there's some stuff that isn't with our control. But what can we do that allows us to lead as ourselves? I asked a client the other day in a session, because she's got a very strong mission about how she wants to create change in an organisation. I asked her, what risks are you willing to take to get there? Real lasting change is not easy. It's not a click of the fingers. It takes perseverance and risk. Sometimes we might have to risk our own sense of safety. Sometimes we have to risk people not liking us. We might have to financial risk, whatever, but there is risk involved in this. What's my question to you? Has there ever been a point where you have said no to a piece of work, or that you've had to say no to yourself perhaps to do certain things because it was so misaligned with what you stood for, you know, and your values? Like, what do we do when, so for example, I'm thinking if we're freelancers and there's an organisation that we have been asked to work for, but we don't necessarily agree with how they work or their values, what they stand for. Has there been anything like that for you?
Yeah, a few times. And I think it's really difficult when you're freelancing as well. I think it's a massive privilege when you're turning work down, because usually you've got a bit of a safety net. If you're saying no to something, you've usually got a little pot of cash, or your husband can pay the mortgage that month, or your mum can step in, or whatever it is. You've got a little bit of a safety net. And some people don't have that opportunity, that safety net. So, like, caveat, that's my caveat for this, is like, yes, that's all very well standing in your values and saying no to work. My website is very feminist, it's very feisty, and there would still be people who got through to the book a cup of tea stage, or who booked me for a witching hour or whatever. I hope that they read my website and go like, oh, well, I'm a knobhead, I probably shouldn't work with Siobhan, because it says literally in black, purple, dark blue, I don't work with knobheads. So you kind of hope that they would get to this thing and be like, I don't want to work with her, she's very vocal. But they do, they book in a call, and I would sit on a call and they'd drop in something about like stop the boats, or, oh yeah, Brexit's great. And I'd be like, I can't do this. And then they give me their timeline. I'll be like, I actually got a lot of work on at the moment, so I don't think I'd be able to meet your timeline. I'd kind of wiggle my way out of it. Or, depending on the mood I was in, I've definitely done this once, where I've just been like, I don't think I'm right for you. I don't think our values align. I don't think you're going to be able to stomach my conversations because I won't be able to stop myself.
Yeah.
And then I've worked with all sorts of people. And I was like, I think you need to work with more all sorts of people.
Yeah, there are more. Then do you also,
are they all white men?
I also wonder, like, I completely get what you're saying. And then there's also part of me that feels like, well, this is a should though. So I'm not convinced. Is it like, should we also be having those conversations with people who are so far away, like, you know, where we are at? Like, but I wonder whether that's sort of me in my rescuer mode, going like, I can free these people from. I mean, I've tried it with many and it hasn't worked. I guess with all of it, it's about thinking about your intention, isn't it? What is your intention in this relationship? Both, you know, if you're a freelancer in an organization or coach, client, whatever it is, what are our intentions here? And can we start on the same, you know, are we moving in the same direction? Like, I've worked with clients who have perhaps different political views to me, and then I have to take that to supervision and sometimes think through that. It can be quite triggering, but there's lots of stuff that can feel like that in coaching, so take it to supervision. I suppose I'm answering the question that I set to you, but there's something about, are we heading for the same sort of thing? And we can disagree agreeably on things if we need to. In a coaching space, you are being non-judgmental ideally, and you're leading from curiosity, or why, what's important for you about that, rather than I think this, you think that.
Yeah. I don't want to put my name on something that could potentially harm others.
Yes.
So there's a difference, isn't there, between disagreeing with someone where it doesn't really cause harm. For example, your parenting style might be different to my parenting style, but we're still raising children.
Yes.
Or we both drive. You might be really into electric cars and I have a diesel.
Yeah. I've got a 20-year-old Volvo.
I've got a massive van, which its diesel consumption is awful. So I'm like, oh, climate justice. But yeah, those are the things you can disagree on. Yeah. I'm not going to be like, fuck you, and this, because this is how I am. So for example, if you start telling me that you're happy with people dropping bombs on a small 25-mile section of occupied Palestine, and you're okay with that, I'm not going to be able to work with you, because genocide is a line I'm not going to cross.
Yeah.
Or if you are like, I really think it's great that Keir Starmer's stopping people committing fraud with PIP. I'm like, well, there isn't any fraud in PIP. We should be taxing millionaires and billionaires. Those are things I can't. I'm not saying everyone has to do this, but those I can't sit and work with someone. For example, on a VIP day, I can't sit in a hotel lobby with you writing your website when you're, donating to the IDF. I personally can't do that, and I would rather see you get in the sea, frankly. And I am quite black and white like that. Obviously, there's nuance around things, and I understand that people vote different ways for different reasons. If any of my old school friends are listening to this, they're like, she has always been like this. They know.
Do you think that black and whiteness is part of who you are, or have you done the work to get to the point where you feel so strongly about these issues? Because I think there's a lot of people who are very, what am I trying to say? Who maybe aren't so clear about how they feel about certain things. They're not like, I completely agree with this point of view and I completely disagree with this point of view. Do you think it's important for people to be able to position themselves in those places?
Yeah. So the people I'm talking about that I can't work with are the people who are going on a Brexit march. They are the ones shouting about reform. They're the ones who think Nigel Farage is the best thing since sliced bread. Do you know what I mean? But those are the people I'm talking about. I can work with plenty of people who are like, oh, I don't really understand Palestine. So I get that you're really passionate, but I don't really understand it. So then I've like drip, drip, drip. And eventually they're like, oh yeah, I'll go on a march. Indoctrination does work. But I personally think it's about role modeling. They're seeing me doing these things. So I'm coming to a client meeting, and last night I was at an event for Palestine Solidarity Campaign. So I'll be like, oh yeah, I was at this thing last night. It was really great. And they were talking about Hebron, and they were talking about settler attacks and blah, blah, blah. And they'll be like, oh, I saw there was a thing from Louis Theroux on BBC iPlayer. Do you think I should watch it? Like, yeah, it would give you a really good insight into what's going on over there. We need to be bringing people into these movements. We need to be open enough that we can bring people in and say, you might not have got it till now, but you've read 3 books and now you understand, or you listen to a podcast with Megan. I think we need to be open enough to let people change their minds and learn. We need to be open enough to do that. But I think there's a point where people are at where that you're not going to change their minds. This is something I learned very quickly door knocking in the Labour Party. No, I got expelled in 2022, guys. It's fine. I'm not part of the Labour Party anymore. It's all good. But when I used to door knock, my mentor would say to me, do not try and convince people. They are wasting your time. And you're not going to change their minds in 5 minutes on the doorstep. And that's the same with like, a call with somebody. You're not going to be able to change their mind. It is a drip effect. Usually something has to impact, particularly in Britain or Western civilization, something has to directly impact you before it will change your mind. So for example, we've seen this in America where white women are like, okay, absolutely fine. Nothing's going on. And they got a bit angry in 2016 when Trump got in, and then they were like, everything's fine, status quo, all fine. And then Trump gets in again. They're seeing their abortion rights stripped. They're watching their neighbours get taken away by ICE, who've got no criminal record. They're watching their children get arrested at university for protesting against a genocide. And they're like,
shopping bills are rising.
Yes,
disposable income reducing.
Eggs are $12 or whatever. It's now directly impacting them. But this has been a slow, the awake people have seen this coming and they've been telling you about it for a decade, but you haven't listened because you were safe until it directly affects people. When I was on the doorstep, I'd knock on the door and I'd say, hi, I'm Siobhan, I'm standing for the Labour Party. Who are you voting for this election? And they'd say, oh, I'm voting Tory or independent or whatever. And I would say, oh, brilliant. Can you tell me about why you're making that choice, in a positive way? And then they're like, oh, because they're going to do this for the NHS or whatever. I'm like, oh, right. So what do you think of the last 14 years of decimation? Like, have you noticed a change in what's been going on in the local community? Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Our local clinic's shut. And they're literally unpicking it for themselves in the conversation. They're like, oh, and then they'd say something like, oh, yeah, my daughter had to go to hospital. No, she had to wait 6 hours. And then she only saw a nurse. She didn't even see a doctor. I'm like, well, why do you think that is? So it's a bit like coaching where you're just curious about why they've... But eventually they might join the dots and it might not be on that doorstep.
Yeah.
They might then read a Guardian article. Yeah. Unlikely, but they might read something on Facebook that their mate Sally posted, or their granddaughter brings home something from school about climate change. And it all eventually will maybe start to make a difference. But I think that's the thing, is you're not going to convince somebody on Facebook or somebody at a dinner party that you're right. And don't get me wrong, like I will try. I will try, especially if I've had a few ciders.
Demon girl coming up. I think what you're demonstrating and what I'm noticing here is that sense of I'm leading from who I am, what matters to me, and my values. So you're really clear on what your lines are. Yeah. You're also very clear on what is in your control and what's not in your control, how to support people to have spaces where they can ask these questions. That's leadership, isn't it? To kind of lead and influence. It's not about pulling people in one direction at all costs to make them believe in you and work with you. And I think it does require a certain boldness. It goes back to what we were saying earlier about making change. What are we willing to risk in order to make this stuff happen? And how can we be bold? We might have to be bold. You are bold. I've noticed in the last couple of years, but in that time, I feel like you seem to be getting bolder and bolder in that and being really clear about what it is you want to have happen. I'm wondering how you look after yourself in that, because it does take energy. You are a parent, you are running your own business and trying to make an income. You've talked a lot about your neurodivergence as well. And how do you look after you in all that? If you do.
If my friend Sadie, if Sadie is listening to this, they're going to be like, all right. But in theory, because I am really good at looking after myself in some respects, I'm really clear on what I believe in and what I will or won't do. I know that I have quite watery boundaries in, like, if someone asks me for help, I'm quite like, you know, I will keenly support them. But is it Tricia Hersey talks about rest as resistance?
Yeah.
And there's that brilliant bit in Audre Lorde where she talks about how she needs rest, basically, and that, you know, that was written when she had breast cancer, I think. So one of the key strands of this is sustaining your activism, basically. So what do? I make sure I get outside. That is one of the key things for me.
Yes.
Can't touch grass. If you're being argumentative with people, or which I have a tendency to do, like, I will go out and be outside. Like, I will walk around my garden. I've got a beautiful garden. I will take my collie for a walk just to get some perspective in life and to literally walk along and smell the bluebells and, you know, occasionally choke on a fly. For me, like, getting outside every day, even if it is just throwing a ball for strike around the garden rather than actually going for a walk, sitting outside, getting the sun on my face, feeling the wind, listening to the birds, that's how I get my rest. That's when I'll do a little bit of breathing practice, especially if I've had quite a full-on day. You know, things that put me out of my comfort zone. Talking on podcasts isn't really putting myself out of comfort zone, but, like, I get like a bit of a vulnerability hangover afterwards because I'm like, oh my God, what did I actually say? Normally I can stand by everything I said, but occasionally I'm like, was that slander? So getting outside is one thing. Making sure that I don't just drink tea all day is a big challenge of mine. I try really hard to drink water because I will forget. Neurodivergence is something that I have to remind myself to do.
Yeah.
The main thing for me is sisterhood. Like, having people that I can have genuine conversations with, that I can cry with, that I can share the ups and the downs, I'm really struggling with this, can anybody help me? I find asking for help really difficult, whether it's childhood trauma or HD, I don't know. Like, I find it really, perimenopause, who fucking knows?
Cauldron of joy.
It's such a wonderful mix. I find asking for help really challenging. The people I've got in my sisterhood, different friendship groups, different friendships at different times. I wouldn't ask of my old school friends the same things that I might ask of the people I've known for 6 years in business, who have gone through stuff with. I wouldn't ask the same things of them, but I like having friends that you can talk to and having a space where you can practice stuff, like bringing it back to the Sister Speaks. But yeah, I just think it's really valuable. I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't done the Jo Cox Women in Leadership program and had sisters supporting me to make challenging decisions, to help me step forward, and for them to say things like, of course you can stand for Police and Crime Commissioner. You're Siobhan Strode. Of course you can do that. And I wouldn't have done this, like, launched this Sister Speaks, if Kerry hadn't been in my corner. And I wouldn't have got through miscarriage and COVID.
that little thing.
But I wouldn't have got through all of that if I hadn't had people that I could lean on and support. My husband is amazing. He's a feminist. He's really supportive. I wouldn't have been able to do any of the things I could without him. But I can't talk to him in the same way that I can talk to my sisters, my business pals, my comrades. He gets it to a point. He's a teacher. He doesn't run his own business. A lot of he's like, social media can give a shit, mate, whatever. But my pals, I can be like, oh my God, somebody commented this on my thing. What do I do? Like, do you know what I mean? Like,
even those big questions, I think, about the ethical stuff. I know that we've often had this conversation about how you align with your values when working on these big social media platforms. It's stuff like that as well that you can bounce ideas around and get some guidance or support, or even just have people listen. I think that all of those things you said about being outside, I totally agree. there's an app called the Merlin app where you can record
Ooh.
bird sound and it will tell you what bird you can hear.
Oh, I'm a
I'm
nerd.
absolutely addicted.
I love that.
It's so good. I'm learning bird sounds.
I am a nerd. I do know quite a lot of the bird sounds around here.
Do
I'm like a
you?
proper twitcher.
Yeah.
Like,
See,
I'm
I
like,
wasn't, but I feel like I am now. But lying on the hammock and just listening to the birds. Oh my God,
yeah,
amazing. But, also the water. I think you've touched upon a couple of big things for me, which is that connection. In order for us to thrive and have a life that we feel satisfied by, we really need connection. We need some kind of intimacy, whether it's friends, partners, colleagues, whatever it is, connecting with others. We're social beings, aren't we? My mother-in-law, before she passed away, told me that friendships are really important. She said that, she'd been married for like 40 something years to my father-in-law, and said that her friendship with her best friend, and they'd known each other since they were 9, was so important because that gave her something completely different to what she got from her husband. And that, cultivating those friendships, paying attention to them, investing in them is, I think, so, so important. And then the other thing is, I think, a big thing is about really being connected to meaning and purpose. That is what helps our well-being. That's what helps us to thrive. And even though it's not always an easy ride, understatement of the year. Actually, if you are connected to that, if you feel like you've got that meaning when you wake up in the morning and when you put your head on the pillow at night and you've done something, then that is really beneficial. But I guess just kind of bring it back to this of how do we speak our stories? How do we share that? How do we understand what really matters to us and then share that with others? I do think that by having those conversations with different people, that's how you figure it out, whether it's your coach, mentor, friends, or testing out those phrases. I think with people, not phrases, what am I talking about? Like those ideas, those concepts, being able to do that and to have people on your side. So you don't feel like you're alone. Leadership can feel lonely. Getting those peer groups, a sister circle, or whatever it is, I think maybe that's our overriding message from today, Siobhan, is like, find your people who you can really, who will help you understand yourself, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And I'm going to do a little pitch here for Sally and her portal.
Oh, yes, good idea.
Because I have found some beautiful souls on there, and there's brilliant offerings on there that are, maybe you will find your people. If you haven't got these connections, you haven't got the sisterhood, if you feel like you're on the outskirts, the people in there will make you feel seen. They will make you feel heard. I'd love you to come and join the Sister Speaks as well. But like the portal has been an amazing place for me in terms of cross-pollination and meeting people who have completely different backgrounds to me, who have no agenda. They're not trying to sell me something. Like when you go to networking and you're like, oh, I might meet some great business pals here. There's always like, can we book a coffee so I can tell you about my thing? I know you do some lovely networking stuff as well, but the portal has just been, I went to a rage circle at the beginning of last week or the week before, I can't remember, Easter, it was a blur. And that was just like, I met some brilliant people in there who I'd not connected with before. And we ranted and we raved and we raged. Yeah. And it was beautiful. And we cried. And it was just, yeah. And that, that was a free thing that you can go to on the portal. You don't have to be paying thousands of pounds to join a group to meet these wonderful people.
Yeah. I agree. And it's called the Portal Collective, and I'll put the link in the show notes as well, because I am also on there and will be doing something on there at some point. I think even if online stuff isn't your thing, thinking about who are the friends or connections that I already have that I would really love to develop further, saying, hey, do you fancy meeting up for a coffee, or whatever it is. We might already have those kind of people in our circle, but we're not paying attention to them. You've obviously talked about this, Sister Speaks. How can people find you? How can they get more information on this?
You can head to my Instagram, because that's where I hang out most. My Instagram handle is This Sister Scribes, and my LinkedIn, I'm Siobhan Strode on LinkedIn, so you can come and find me there and make it a nicer place to hang out. Yeah, and my link to This Sister Speaks group thing is in my bio. There's a waitlist ready to go. And come and hang out with me, book a cup of tea, have a chat. Let's talk about the state of the world, the poly crisis, whatever it is that you want to rant and rave about. I love collaborating with people. So if you want to book me for a panel, or you want me to come and talk to your community, or you want me on your podcast, I'm really open to different collaborations. And if you think, that we align, then love to connect.
Do that. I feel like you should come over to LinkedIn more. I think that's where you can be bold.
I try.
Come on, you can do it. We need you. We need you. Thank you so much. It's just been a really brilliant conversation for me. I hope everyone who's listening to this feels the same. I'm so glad we managed to get this organised.
Thank you for having me.
Thank
you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to that conversation with Siobhan Strode. I hope it's left you feeling inspired and ready to trust your voice, to share your story and really lead with your values wherever your work is taking you. If you're feeling the pull to make a bold, meaningful change and you would like some support to turn that into a clear and practical plan, then I would love to hear from you. Get in touch and we can explore how I can help you to do good and do well in a way that feels true to you and that will really make a difference in the world. You'll find all the details in the show notes, and as always, I'd love to know what resonated with you most from today's conversation. Until next time, take very good care.